I'm Cyd Zeigler. I'm co-founder of Outsports.com, LGBTQ sports website, and usually we stay away from politics on Outsports. But we wanted to figure out some way to engage the community in this conversation. We thought a great way to do it would be to have some people on who've gone from sports to politics and talk about some of the things that they've learned from sports, brought into politics, and of course, we'll talk about some hot button issues as well, I'm sure. We have Anthony Nicodemo, who's a coach, educator, union chief, president of the Hudson Valley Stonewall Democrats, on from New York. Akil Patterson in Baltimore, former football player and wrestler, president of Community Advocate Consultants. You can find more about him at akil4bmore.com. And both of them are former and I'm sure future candidates for the Democratic Party locally. And of course, we're thrilled to have, are you in DC right now, Representative Davids?
I am.
Sharice Davids represents Kansas, a former MMA fighter, incredible life story, raised by a single mom, first out LGBTQ Native American elected to Congress. So go to ShariceForCongress.com to learn more about her. And Sharice, I know that we have a limited amount of time with you for good reason. Just kind of quickly, what are a couple of the things that you are really focused on right now and that's taking up the most of your time?
Well, there's a couple of things going on that literally in the moment. One of the reasons that we have a short amount of time is because we will be voting on and passing out of the House the Justice and Policing Act here later today. And then, the coronavirus pandemic that we're in has just, it's been devastating so many communities. And I know we're seeing a lot of increases in cases these days. So just being at home, I spend most of my time at home in Kansas these days and just trying to meet virtually with as many people as possible and just really try to figure out the ways that I can be helpful in my district and in my state, because we're feeling it, from small businesses to families that are being impacted. And yeah.
And of course, obviously we've arrived at a particular moment in history, but everybody has a past and everybody has a journey of how we got here. And your past includes MMA fighting. And I'm curious, like, at what moment for all three of you, what moment did you say, I need to commit myself to a life of public service and a life in government and politics? And just start with you, Representative Davids. Like, what was that moment that made you say, this is what I need to do?
That's an interesting question. I think that for a little while, it was not that I knew that meant running for office, doing what I consider to be public service work. So I'm a martial artist. I have been doing martial arts for a while now, since I was 19. And I had always felt that martial arts was for me. Like it was a thing that was, it was core to what I felt like was my progress as a human. But the work that I was doing professionally, I started doing martial arts before I went to law school. But once I got to law school and got done with law school, I really saw I was doing community and economic development work with Native communities, and just felt like, there was so much work to do to make sure that the next generation and the one after that and the one after that have something better to look forward to. And so I think it was probably like at some point after I got out of law school and I started doing community and economic development work, that I really figured out that I was in it for the long haul. I was at a nonprofit, and then came and worked for the federal government, and then eventually ran for office.
Akil, I know the community work has been important to you for a long, long time. Was there a moment where you said, that I need to dedicate myself to this kind of work?
No, I don't think there was ever that moment. And I always, it's funny because I always tell people, while most people are just now waking up, my parents made sure that I was born woke. And that meant by, my parents were married on June 19th, which is Juneteenth, which everyone now celebrates. I've had to celebrate every year for the last, my parents have been married for 40 years. My brothers and I all got very traditional African and Arabic names because my parents wanted us to make sure that we understood where our roots came from and where we were in our society. So my first and my middle name means, it's Akil Siddiqui, which means intelligent friend. And so because of that, I felt as though my parents were always part of this. And so I give a lot of my credit up to them because they raised me to think and to always be of service to your community and to your friends and to your family. So that's just something that I feel has always been part of my narrative. But actually your question directly, Cyd, is I think after I got clean and I changed my life and I turned my life around, I think that's when I remembered who I was, and that was about 10 years ago. Now, at 26 years old, I decided, what, it's time to get my life together and start planning for the future. So I think that's when it's going to be 100% all in to make sure that people have a better life, especially when I look at my.
Anthony, since I've met you years ago, even before you came out, you've been a leader in your community. What is it about politics? And I've seen you go from just a life dedicated totally to sports to a life largely dedicated to politics. What was it that made you want to transition your leadership skills from one to the other?
I think you get, politics could be really frustrating. And I think there's so much red tape and there's so much bureaucracy that's out there that you have to constantly try to get through. I don't think there's any better way to make change than to be in one of those roles. Because now when it comes time to passing a bill, or when it comes time to passing an ordinance, or whatever it may be, you are the conversation. It's not me having to go to 4 or 5 other people to beg them to try to pass a bill. Now I'm the guy passing the bill. So for me, it was getting involved in really trying to create change at the highest level possible. And I don't think there's any higher level than being an elected official. It's their duty. And a lot of them are really good at it and some of them are really bad at it. So I think that for me, it's just about creating change, and there's no better way to make it.
Representative Davids, I'm curious, all of us on the phone call, probably attendees and those of us in the conversation, all of us have dedicated our lives to making change. What is it about being a congresswoman that drew you to that? What is it that made you think that is how I can make change?
That's really interesting. I mean, when I was deciding whether to run or not, one of a key motivator was that I just felt like our member of Congress was not representing us well. It didn't feel like he reflected the sentiment or issues of the district, and I actually tried to get other people to run for office and to run against him, and then I think that at the end of the day, I felt like I was saying that there's a problem here, and I was asking other people to step up and do something, and felt like if I'm asking the question, who's going to do something about this, I should be consider whether or not I'm can be part of the solution. And so I think that having a person who it felt like he was saying one thing and doing another, it felt like he wasn't representing our district well. And then of course, we need more people with a variety of backgrounds and lived experiences running for office, whether it's people who are part of the LGBTQIA community, or people of color, or even like I started off in community college and worked the entire time I was in school, and I think that there's a lot missing from our elected bodies, and just trying to do something to help alleviate that and get us on a path to really to make things better for the next generation.
One of the things that I've found often is missing at the wrong times is determination from some of our elected officials and people in politics. And I found in sports that determination is one of the things that I learned to develop the most, because in sports and politics, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and you've got to figure out, okay, how do I learn from my mistakes here and apply them and win the next time? How do you find the determination after a loss, whether it's in the MMA ring or the political ring, whether it's at the polls or in policy, to regroup and rededicate yourself, rededicate that determination to get it next time?
Well, it's interesting because I do think that you often learn more from a loss than you do from a win. And I know that, I was actually talking to somebody about this earlier, and I was like, well, I lost my second amateur fight, and rarely after that did I ever get caught in an armbar. And it's because that was the thing that I was like, okay, like literally nobody's going to catch me in an armbar again. So I think that sometimes when you lose, you can take away from it is I'm not good at that thing. And you can avoid it, or you can take it head on and say, this is an area where I have seen that I have a weakness of some sort. And what am I going to do to address that and make it better? And I think that in politics, to me, or, whether we're trying to get a bill passed, as a freshman member, I didn't walk into this place with a ton of clout. And so I'm having to learn a ton. The learning curve is very steep. And every time you do something, if there's a lesson there, and trying to figure out, okay, what is it that I need to do, and having a game plan for how you're going to try to do it. I definitely think that there's something about, okay, that didn't work. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, that didn't work. And I know, at least in martial arts, I often would tell people I don't have any kind of emotional reaction to getting punched in the face. It just means that I did something wrong if I got punched in the face. So like, what do I need to do next time? What was I doing wrong that I let that person get the better of me and actually make contact? And I feel the same way about this. Like if I'm trying to do something and it doesn't work out, it just means that I need to reevaluate and figure out what I need to do next.
Something staying with you, and then something I'd love to hear from Anthony and Akil as well is, what's been your political armbar so far? What's been that situation that you got into where you said, okay, I need to make sure that doesn't happen again?
For right now, well, luckily I've only had one election and I won that one.
And but again, wins and losses in politics, the election comes once every 2 years. You're dealing with policy fights every single day.
All the time. Yeah.
I'm not talking about the polls. I'm talking about policy battles as well. Yeah.
So there's been a couple of times that I, up to this point, that I've realized, there's so much about relationships and understanding what are other people, like what are some of the other members of Congress, what do they care about? What are they interested in? I've tried to get a couple of bills included in different packages of bills, and there was one last year that I remember trying. I just remember that we were trying to get a bill included in a package, and it didn't end up happening. And it wasn't until afterwards that I realized, oh, you know what I should have done? I probably should have tried to talk to the chairperson of the committee. I probably should have tried to see if I could get a few more co-sponsors on it. And I think that, like, it in the moment, at the time when the bill came to the floor and I didn't have the bill that I wanted included in it, that definitely doesn't feel like a win. And so I think that that's the time where I just got a better sense of what are some of the things that I need to be doing, who do I need to be talking to, and who should I be asking for help from. I think that's a huge lesson in getting policy through, is who can you find that can be helpful, because the more people you can get on board, the more effective you're going to be.
Consensus building and understanding your team, two pretty elementary parts of sports and politics. Akil, how about you? What has been a moment where you've had you guys caught an armbar and you said, I can't let that happen again?
Big pharma. I was passing a bill here in the state of Maryland. It was a drug price affordability bill, and it was 3 sessions ago. And I walked in, and the pharmaceutical lobbyist was sitting across from the table from me, and he looked at me and he said, "This is your fault. You guys didn't come to us with a clean bill." Now, this is after 3 or 4 ideations of the bill. And he says, "It's your fault. You didn't come to us with a clean bill." And as you and Anthony might know far better than the congresswoman, I got into the Akil Patterson mode, and I told him about himself and where he could go and where he could stick his pharmaceutical problem. And but unfortunately, there was a legislator passing by, and they heard my voice raise, and I have a very unique and distinct voice. And the legislator comes back and says, "I don't think I'll vote for your bill because I didn't like the way you were talking to somebody," not knowing who the other person was. And I said, "You know what? That was on me." Now, everyone in the room heard the full context of that conversation. Everyone in the room equated to that moment from Thank You for Smoking. If you ever seen the movie Thank You for Smoking, where the tobacco company just gets their rear ends handed to them. Well, that's what I did to the pharmaceutical lobbyists. I told them, it's not our problem, it's your problem. You put the opioids on the street. I didn't make them. I didn't give them to kids. You did. And so when we were having this robust conversation, I learned from that moment that I can still have that effect where I'm attacking and I'm presenting evidence and I'm talking about the facts without seeming so brandish and bullish and loud. And so I've worked very diligently on lowering my tone and making sure that if I'm going after those big pharmaceutical companies, or if I'm going after a major corporation again, I have to remember that all eyes are on me. Just like football field, they'll never see that first punch thrown. They're going to see that second punch thrown, and that's when I get ejected. So I've got to recognize that was my armbar, is that I am sometimes very loud and I'm passionate, but I have a standpoint.
As a college football referee, I'll tell you, it's the coaches that will talk to you and not yell at you that a lot easier to work with. Anthony, how about you?
I think, echoing a little bit different than what the Congresswoman said makes all the sense. When you're new to something, you have to figure it out. And when I jumped in and ran for state assembly, I didn't build the bridges that were necessary. I I'm the chair of the LGBT committee. I'm friends with the mayor. I'm friends with this one. Jumping in to run for office was a completely different thing. A lot of the people who were my friends and were extremely supportive of me were no longer necessarily supportive because they had a different candidate in mind. So for me, I agree. It's knowing what there is. I would go a different route where if the day comes where I run again, making sure I have the district leader's support, making sure I have support of the party. And the support of the party is a little bit, obviously nowadays, we just had 2 major congressional elections here in Westchester where Elliot Engel more than likely is not going to win. And we have the first openly gay African-American in Mondaire Jones, most likely coming out of our region. So it's not necessarily having the party, but still having those inroads to make sure you have all that support, because it was a real uphill battle not having it, and it ultimately affected the outcome of the election. So I think getting involved and learning those roads were really important for me. And now, 2 years later, I'm in a different role, but I didn't necessarily hold anything personal. I'm still friends with these people. We still go to events together. And I think that is the way to go too, rather than taking politics personal, because a lot of times it's just not personal.
Yeah, I think I want to dig into that with you two, but I know we only have a couple more minutes left with the Congresswoman. So Representative Davis, I wanted to ask you, kind of last one, I want to ask it, how does being LGBTQ and being a woman of color, how do those two things educate the priorities you put on policies that you're going to pursue?
It's an interesting question. I think partly because it's my norm. So it's just kind of, I don't know how I would be, I don't know what things I would be bringing forth or doing differently, except that, you know, the primary focus of the things that I work on, really, it like bubbles up from the conversations I have in the district. And I think it's really interesting to think about the number of people who come and talk to me. You know, I'm constantly doing outreach and trying to figure out ways to reach people that I might not otherwise just like run into in the regular course. But I think a lot of people reach out to our office that might not have maybe reached out to my predecessor. I'm not sure. I think that especially on the campaign side, I know for sure we've got folks who are constantly reaching out. You know, in Kansas, it was not that long ago that people were like, I'm a Democrat. So, you know, I think we get a lot of people just showing up on the campaign side. On the official side, I think I will say that I do think my lived experience has it's helped me see that what people think of as kind of the default reality and experience is, you know, not my experience. I have a non-traditional path to getting to Congress, and that means that when I'm talking to folks, a lot of times, you know, people will say, well, this is how it is for me, and it's a different kind of experience than what I've had. But I recognize that, like, someone else's experience is just as real and valid as my experience. And I recognize that because I want other people to see my experience as being real and valid. And then I do want to touch on, though, the idea of not taking politics personally, because I think that's a really interesting thing for folks to know about. And actually, earlier when I said, you know, there's not emotion attached to me getting punched in the face. Granted, this is in gyms, so you know, when you're training and you're sparring and you get hit or kicked, you don't take it personally because it's part of the process. In politics, I think that's probably one of the key things that can translate over is I show up and I know that if people are mad about a specific policy, if I wasn't their candidate, if like all these different things, you know, I do think that one of the things you take away from sports is when you're in the cage or you're out on the field or whatever it is, everybody's trying, like, I'm trying to win, they're trying to win, they're punching and kicking at me, I'm punching and kicking at them. No matter what, it takes a lot of guts to even try. So there's a level of respect that I have always had for anybody who I've had 6 amateur fights and 2 professional fights. And, you know, I might never go to their gym and train. I might not like a bunch of the stuff that they have to say or do, but there's a level of respect there for somebody who's like willing to try to compete. And then, you know, so much of what happens in politics is like, it's about parties, or it's about, you know, I mean, and in some places with primaries going on, it's one group saying, we think we've got someone who's going to represent us better than you've been representing us. And at the end of the day, like, so much of that has nothing to do with any one of us, like personally as a human being. And I think that being able to take that lesson from martial arts over to what I'm doing now I think it's been very, very helpful, at least for my like well-being.
Well, I can imagine in politics, you get attached to something you're pushing, and particularly when it may be an issue that's been important to you all your life, and it gets rejected, or someone who you thought was on your team says they don't want to support it. I can only imagine how that would eat at you in a way that a loss in a sports match never would, if you let it.
Yeah, if you let it.
I think she's right on. I mean, I always say there are no friends in politics, just really good acquaintances for a while. And I believe it. In the political world that I've operated in, I've hung out, I've been to christenings and birthdays and holidays. But when it came to me, taking that and moving over to the politics side, it was totally different. It's, well, we really like you and we really want to support you, but we can't because so-and-so's friends with the, party leader or the party chair. And, they worry about their next election. They worry about their campaign finance. They're worried about their fundraising efforts. Yeah. And I can see where she comes from, and Anthony too. It's very difficult, because I used to be the guy everyone came to get a check. And now, when I'm asking everybody for a check, I feel the same way. I'm like, uh-oh, yeah, don't talk to me right now. I don't want to be seen in public because, so-and-so, the leader of the Senate sitting over there and he's already mad at me about something. So I don't want to take your money,
Yeah, well, and we'll continue the conversation there, Akil, but Representative Davids, I know that you have some business to attend to. And so just wanted to thank you for joining us. And I assume that ShariceForCongress.com is where people can go to support you?
Yep. That's our website, Sharice for Congress. We're on, well, we're not on TikTok, but we're on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff.
You better get on TikTok. That's the new.
I know. Well, I need to show off my dance moves.
Great job on the bill, by the way. Keep up the good work. You guys are doing some great work out there.
Thank you. And it was good to see you all.
You too.
Thank you so much.
Good work. See you all later.
Stop by your office.
I'll be here. Well, hopefully we can see each other in person. See you all.
Thank you. It's interesting, kind of one of the things I wanted to dive into more with you too, and it goes on the idea of, being able to separate in sports and politics, taking things personally and not. And I remember when Anthony, you started running for office, I said, just remember that intra-party politics are way uglier than inter-party politics. And sure enough, the intra-party politics came and grabbed you and shook you. How did you move past that and continue to, not take it personally and when it just seemed at the time so personal?
Well, I think, I don't know if I have, I think there's a lot of things that I still hold there. The big one was when they ran a hit piece in a local newspaper that no one really reads, but even so, they attacked me for being gay. They, accused me of being transgender and this, that, and the other thing, and all this craziness. And, my opponent at the time, his banner was about the article that was ripping me and saying all this nonsense. So it was clear that he was involved with them. There's no way to ever know what the actual connection was. But now in a situation where I'm the president of an LGBT democratic organization, when these people come to us for endorsements, I have the ability to say, you advertise with this newspaper who has been overtly homophobic. So we need you to stop advertising with this newspaper or we can't endorse you. So there's a way that it's come 360 now, and, it's changed things. The biggest thing for me, I knew a lot of these people personally before this. I know them now. And there's a professional level when you see someone in a room and you shake their hand. But at the end of the day, I know what those people are. So the people that were whispering in my ear, hey, I'm rooting for you, anything I could do, but I can't publicly support you. I don't forget that. It's in the back of my mind whenever I see them. And there's a lot of those people out there. I just know that you have to, you can't burn every bridge. So you have to put that in your back pocket and understand that that's the nature of the game.
obviously we have an incredibly diverse community, racially, gender. We have cis people, trans people, and by the way, unfortunately, we do not have a trans person on this panel today. I tried to find somebody really wanted to find people from the sports world who are in politics right now. So obviously, if we talk about trans issues, we are doing so from a cis perspective. But obviously, you give advice to different people depending on who they are and where they are. But are there some of the skills that you've learned that you think people learn in sports that you can suggest to people that they rely on if they are looking to get into politics, or where can somebody start if they want to get into this world?
I think working on a campaign is a really good start. I think, and obviously, I don't think he's in the room, but, Connor Mertens, who was an Outsports story, moved to Washington to help me run my campaign. He was a rookie and he was my campaign manager mainly because I trusted him. And I wanted someone that I could bounce ideas off and I could maybe yell at a little bit, because I knew that for me, this was a new thing. But I think starting on a campaign that you believe in is probably the best place to go. I mean, I know you just talked about, not having someone transgender on. On Father's Day on Sunday, I sat outside the polls for 2 hours talking to voters here for early voting for one of our board members, Kristen Brody, who would be the first openly transgender elected official in New York. And, I thought that was important. And even now, I still go out and I do these things. So I think it's important. And if you really want to get involved and you want to get your feet wet, that's the way to do it. It's not something that I really did. I didn't do it myself until I started to run. I helped State Senator Shelley Mayer get elected and knocked on doors and stuff like that. And I think that's the best way to go. You got to get your feet wet and learn how this all works first before you dive in, because if not, it's a rough road.
Yeah, I think what I would have done is I would have taken some internships back in college that were definitely around political campaigns. I'd started a little younger. Learn the ins and outs of everything that you can if you want to be in this, because it's not easy. It's not an easy road. There is a lot of emotions when you're young. You get yourself hyped up over a bill being introduced, and then you're sad when it fails. So I think those are aspects that I would say is that get involved when you're younger, and make sure you stay consistent with your ideology, not necessarily your opinions, but your ideology. It will decide your opinions along the way. And so if you do decide that you are changing your mindset, it was about an opinion, not necessarily an ideology. I believe that all people have the right to live freely, right? That's an ideology. Now, how do we enact that? It looks different for each person. I will say that if there was something that could relate to sports as being in politics, tenacity. I mean, just not quitting, that never finish, like just always finishing everything, no matter what. Just if your coach says run to the line, run to the line.
How about losing?
Because guess what? Huh?
How about losing? Losing to me is like, that's I took my loss at Saunders when I had that really good 16-win team. We got upset in the quarterfinals way harder than I did losing in the assembly race. Not even close. I didn't sleep for days after that loss. I was emotional. I never took the political loss the same way. My losses from coaching, those bad losses still sting me more than losing in the assembly race. And it's just a fact. So I think we're trained to lose a little bit more. We take it easier.
Well, I think what I felt is losing a campaign and you leaving it all on the. It's like leaving it all on the field or on the court, right? You busted your butt. You did everything in your power to do, and you know what? You can't change stupid. You know that. You did everything that you did. You trained hard. You worked hard. You left it all on the field or on the court or on the mat. End of the day, it didn't go your way. But guess what? You walk away holding your head up proud. As opposed to a lot of politicians that go off storming and screaming and kicking in the dead night, you go, why are you upset? If you did everything you're supposed to, there's no reason to be upset, because you cannot control the actions of others. You can only control yours. And that's what a campaign is really about. It's about you doing what you do. No unforced errors on your part. But guess what? At some point, somebody might hit a grand slam home run, and hey, they got lucky too.
Well, I think that is what we're seeing now. I just kind of talked about it in New York. You have Elliot Engel, who, I've supported through and through. He's a terrific congressman. He's done a lot for our area. He's done a lot for unions, for the LGBT community. You know, more than likely, it looks like he's going to lose to Jamal Bowman, an African-American man. And I think that what we've seen in the last 3 weeks in this country has shifted a lot of races. And I think that we all talk and we don't know what the world's going to be like the next day. And what we've now seen socially in this country over the last 3 or 4 weeks, politics shifted with that as well. And I think, you know, that's the grand slam. You know, who would have thought if I talked on March 1st that our country was going to be shut down? Who would have thought on, you know, May 1st that we were going to have this murder that was going to change our country fundamentally forever? You know, you can't predict these things. And I think politics I learned that this year with what I've just seen over the last month and a half and with the pandemic. You just don't know what's going to occur. It's just how the world works.
I totally agree with that one. It's crazy. You know, Cyd's like, hey, can I be the moderator now?
Not at all. As I called Anthony an hour ago, I said, by the way, the second half of this, if I just don't say a word, YouTube can have at it, because YouTube, you guys are the ones in politics. I'm just a moderator. So I have a couple questions and thoughts, but by all means, you guys, listen, they came here to hear you, not me.
Oh, thank you. But let's hear your next question, Cyd, or somebody's question.
Well, it was off of, you know, again, some of what you're talking about. You talked about, Akil, having an ideology and your opinions may shift. And you know, when I approach coaching or team building, I always have a philosophy behind what I'm doing. And we're going to head in this direction, but I may be tugged this way by circumstances or people. I may be tugged that way, but we're not going to be tugged that way. And I think that you're looking at politics right now and the different, you know, obviously these different things that are popping up, you know, two colossal life-changing issues pop up. And I think that, you know, continuing what I think that the struggle that I think a lot of people are having right now is, okay, I've been going this way my whole life. Am I gonna, politicians, how do I keep going that way while at the same time adjusting to what is going on around me?
Yeah, I think that's why that's why athletes never paint themselves in the box, and coaches try not to paint themselves in the box either, because they've got to grow with the times. If you don't grow with the times, you're going to die on the sword. So I believe that coaches and athletes are all having to learn how to progress. Your teammate might change. You know, when I was playing left guard, my left tackle was awesome, but our center goes down. My snapping arm's not so great in the shotgun. They moved the left tackle over to center, and then I've got a new left tackle. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever played football out there, but if you have a new left tackle, that is generally the most prestigious position on offensive line. So if you've got a bad left tackle, that means now I'm going to have more work. Now I'm going to tell this new guy what to do, where to go, but I have to know that I got to be nimble because somebody did that for me when I came in. So that's what I think sports and politics is about, is being nimble, to be able to change, to adjust. Your strategy might change too. You know, you might go from being a power I team to going to a spread offense, West Coast style, funding the gun, a lot of balls going around. You know, so you've got to get yourself to be able to adjust and change with whatever comes your way. Yeah,
I mean, I think, you know, in sports, right, technology has changed so much in the last 20 years. You know, I know coaches who still don't do film, who don't do breakdowns. They're not part of a service. Like, I've been part of Crossover where they upload my game films and we could clip them together. Some guys don't want to embrace that. And I think that's where you fail. I think the best example of shifting with climate in politics in recent years is marriage equality. I mean, you're talking about a shift where, you know, Barack Obama, you know, way back in whatever year it was, 2006, all of a sudden this progression that we saw, and not only him, but everybody. You know, New York State was one of the first states, right? It was 2 years before here, marriage equality before the rest of the nation. And, you know, it was the same thing here. A lot of people became pro-marriage equality, just their views shifted. They knew people, more people were coming out, the world was changing. And because of that, marriage equality happened. And then, you know, eventually the Supreme Court happened. And obviously there's always going to be still pushback. But there are people who, you know, 4 years before that, never, they eventually progressed and they embraced it. And I think now the majority of the country, of course, embraces it. So I think that's a really good example of that.
So we've talked about, a bunch of different things: determination, team building, listening, consistent ideology, some of the things that you guys have taken from sports and you honed in sports and then you've taken to politics. And anything else come to mind or that you had, that you thought about that you wanted to make sure to talk through? And by the way, if anybody has any questions, you can just type it in the Q&A or chat and we'll make sure that we ask it.
I think one thing I appreciate from sports is this, literally. There are, and one thing that we always know, is I'm pretty honest, is there have been rocky patches with all of us at some point, dealing with one another. But what we learn through sports is it's not forever. You can disagree with a teammate, you can disagree with someone in principle about a certain issue, but it doesn't mean that's the end of the conversation. It just means, hey, we disagreed on this point. We'll come back together at some point and we'll figure the rest of it out. There's no right answer ever. I always believe that. There's no right answer because everyone in their mind has a different answer for everything. But what there is our opportunity to be a better world and a better country if we just take a little bit of time to stop being so aggressive towards one another and just really sit back and say, look, let's figure this thing out. Because we're all, like they say, we're all in this together. No, none of us are sitting at home because we wanted to be. It's because a global pandemic happened and we adjusted and we listened to one another and we eventually found a space where we could talk without being so angry.
And I think with sports, communication is the most important thing. X and O's in a lot of ways are overrated. And how you deal with your players and how you deal with your community and your administrators, that's how you have success. And I'm the first one to say, I know enough about basketball to coach it and to draw up what I need to do. But my forte was understanding my players, knowing what my players were going through, knowing when to give them off, when they needed a day off. That communication was important. And I think that goes into the political realm the same way. You have to be able to communicate when you go out. I mean, for me, some people hate door knocking. I love door knocking. I love knocking on people's doors. And this guy graduated from Saunders in 1948 and played with Joe Dolan, who played for the Baltimore Bullets. I just learned so much, in walking around the neighborhood and knocking on doors or going to community events. That's where I'm at my best, I believe, as a human being. I like to talk. I like to communicate. And, I think during this pandemic, you saw a lot of people who probably didn't get to show off what they were good at because a lot of candidates were locked in their homes, and Zoom calls only go so far. So I think that to me is a big thing that people need to understand when you talk about communication. It goes both. You got to be a good communicator. If not, you can't run for office. And obviously you can get to a point where you run for office and you're in a point of leadership and you can do whatever the hell you want. We see that on TV every day, but you still need to be able to communicate it when you start to climb that ladder, and then of course you can get comfortable and then you get voted out. That's how it goes.
Something Akil said earlier, that there are no right answers. And I think, Akil and I have had a past that we blocked each other on social media and get these huge fights, and that's not going to happen again. One of the reasons is because I've learned, one of the things that I've learned through sports and working with people is that you're right, there are some wrong answers, right? But we all have some right answers too. And how do I elevate other people as long as they don't have the wrong answers, right? I'm not going to go out there and elevate a homophobe on Outsports, or I'm certainly not going to donate my time and money to a homophobic politician. But understanding that we're all on the same team, we're all trying to go in the same general direction. We may have different left twists and turns, but accepting that and understanding that and learning to be, as Gerald Ford said, along being able to disagree without being disagreeable has been a huge lesson for me to learn.
Well, I think, and actually this conversation, and Kirk just, I think, posted a question, but I think one of the things that it helps me understand is I traveled, right? I lived in, rural Montana and Southern Colorado and, Baltimore and in upstate New York. I have a very different perspective of the world based off of my travel. So, when I come to a realization of being able to communicate with people and just work with them effectively and build community, it's because I take all those experiences and I throw them together and I go, okay, where is this person at? I had a conversation with one of my mentees the other day, and it's crazy. He's a young, straight Black man, just had a baby, and he's 20 years old. And I took him to the rooftop of a friend of mine's, and it's nothing fancy. It's a regular apartment building. He goes to the top, and he is so enamored at what he sees. He's like, "Oh my God, I've never seen the Capitol building from a rooftop." And I go, "Oh Lord, he doesn't have those experiences that I have." So his mindset was different. And now that he's seen something different, he is ready to change. And I think that's where most of us come from, is that we have to be ready to change once we see something that might be better, something that might be more to improve our lives. And we create that by just getting there and moving in that direction with each other and showing things that are different and creating our better community.
Yeah, Kirk Walker, a softball coach at UCLA, asked a question just about how divisive our culture has become. So much of political dialogue we hear is where the two sides are opposing each other, and it feels like party over country has become the default. How do you begin more dialogue about where there is commonality?
Oh, gosh. We got 3 more hours? I think, this is something that we've never seen, and I say we, people who are our age, and but there's a fundamental difference in this country, and I truly believe that there's a difference between the classic Republican and the people who truly support Donald Trump for other reasons. And I think that what's happened is we've allowed a lot of these racist, homophobic people that have always been there. It just became more regular. It became okay. And it might not have been something that Donald Trump said that was that terrible, but it was something that we, haven't heard from an elected official or from a president in such a long time that it allowed other people to do the same thing, and it became this systemic problem. I think, my personal opinion, I think we need to get Donald Trump out of the White House. I think that's the beginning of the commonality. I don't think this ever gets solved without him there. And I think while, Joe Biden isn't necessarily, the savior, I think that he would do a better job bridging the gap. And I think there's a lot of Republicans who would do a better job of bridging the gap. I really do. I think this is a very specific Donald Trump issue, different than a Republican issue. And I think that's going to be the start, is we have to kind of create that change, because there's no, and I say this to people all the time, I understand that there's a difference people with abortion. Like, I understand that there's a fundamental ideology different, and I'm okay with that. Same thing with gun control. I'm okay with that. I'm not an anti-gun person. Those are fundamental ideas. But when it comes to equality, there is no argument. And I say this to people all the time. There is no argument about this. There is no argument on whether transgender people should be serving in the military. No, we're not having that. So I think you need to try to find a way to get that piece out, because if someone's arguing against someone else's equality, that's not the same thing as abortion or gun control. So I think we need to start by changing a lot of leadership in this country to start. And then moving forward. But once again, I'm a liberal, I'm a Democrat. So my view is going to be different than if you ask this question of a Republican. And I understand that. I just think we're in a bad place. And I think that our voter turnout really bit us in the ass in 2016. And I think what we're seeing now, I don't think we're going to see it again. I think we're going to see the largest voter turnout that we've seen in the last 50 years. And I think we're going to see sweeping changes across this country. And I might not have said that in February, but here we are under a new civil situation, with civil unrest and under a pandemic. Times change, and who would have predicted in February that this is where we would be? And the conversation of Donald Trump can't lose, right? And how many times have you and I had it said, that's not the conversation anymore here as we enter July. It's a different conversation.
Anthony, I will say there's only one thing in the entire thing you just said that I'm going to disagree with, and I might actually get punched in the face by somebody one day. Our military, because I believe in looking at it from the legal perspective, is that our military does not operate under the same laws that our Constitution essentially mandates. And it's a weird thing. There's a weird caveat through the legal sector in which the military has to be, listen, I'm too tall to fly a jet. That's just it's not my fault, but I'm just too tall. If you become HIV positive while in the military, they will accept you. But if you're HIV positive before you go into the military, they don't allow you to deploy. And these are the nuances that I just said are different. So I'm gonna leave that there, and you guys you'll hear all that out when you bring your bill up. What I will also say is great is that we can have a conversation like that and a dialogue like that in this country and agree to disagree. How we get to a better place really needs to start with us literally not blocking people on social media anymore. and I'm one of the people that's been at fault. But other than a few times, I've literally just gone, I'll just let you go, and I'll correct you, or I'll tell you that you're wrong. But I'm not blocking people, because I think that's where it starts. Is that there was an SNL sketch right after the election with Tom Hanks, and he's talking about, he's a redneck and he's saying all these crazy things. And it was like, ask a black person. And then, well, would do you trust? He's like, it said something like, the government has your cell phone and you trust them. And a big high five, and they pounded them up because they said the same thing. They had more in common than they had apart. That's what we have to start realizing. We're all human. We want to have a good life, a good job, a good career. So that means we have to listen to one another and have a dialogue. Otherwise, we get stuck in this, well, my party's right or your party's wrong. Depending on where you live in America, your party is integrated anyway. I live in Baltimore. Everybody daggone near is a Democrat. I'm sorry, I missed that, Cyd.
No, your audio is breaking up a little bit, Akil. I was just gonna say that I think this is exactly what Kirkwood was asking about. That how do we find commonality instead of allowing us to be focused on where we disagree. So, and I think, to a lot of what everybody has talked about, communication, team building, working through disagreements, consistent ideology, determination. It's all these things. It's that how you build a team. I wish we had a lot more captains and team captains and coaches in our society, because when you lead a team, you learn that you have to be able to figure out how to make people from all these different perspectives come together and work together, and that's that $1 million question if we're going to heal the country. So that's because it's we've got a long way to go from where we're looking right now.
I actually said, I think we are closer than what people think. In Mississippi, they are this close to taking down the Confederate battle flag. They're this close. The lieutenant governor who
I think they voted.
Yeah, they're supposed to be voting on today. So I was making calls earlier.
Yeah, I think they voted.
This close. Yeah, we're this close. And yeah, there's going to be some give and take, but at least it won't be a poison pill. And in Georgia, we might pass a hate crime bill, in which a state is only one of 4 states that doesn't have a hate crime bill that impacts LGBT people. Mm-hmm. In North Carolina, when they went after the HB2 bill, every Democrat that voted for that bill because they were transphobic, I ripped them a new one. You know why? Because if they would have turned to the second page, they would have realized that that stupid bill violated their own 14th frickin' amendment for the health, safety, and welfare of their own people. You know why? Because now it says any protected class can't do it on the local level. So when those African-American Democrats voted for it, I said you voted against your own self-interest because you're so worried about some trans person who doesn't use the bathroom with you. That's why I got upset.
I think at the end of the day, people fear change. This has been a problem in our country forever, since the inception of this country, since we got here. People fear change, and we are a progressive nation. And when I say this, people, I've had people argue with me. Of course, I call them Trumpers. That Roosevelt wasn't a progressive, or crazy stuff. And I'm like, wasn't a progressive? The progressive movement has existed, and